Hello, my name is Genevieve Forget. I am leading this webinar on behalf of the MCCO Refugee Finance team. So I'd like to welcome you to the MCCO Refugee Finance webinar series. This series has been created for the purpose of walking constituent groups, or CGs, through the finance process of sponsorship. It is specifically directed for the groups who have raised funds through MCC. So when a group raises funds through MCC, those funds are placed in the Refugee Resettlement Designated Account, or RRDA, with MCC. And so these videos are specifically for those groups who have RRDAs with MCC. This is part 4 of the series, the RRDA budget reports. We will be talking about the reporting process and requirements for the sponsorship here in this series. When a CG first enters into an agreement with MCC about doing a sponsorship, we get our CGs to sign a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU. For groups whose finances are going through MCC, we get you to sign 2 MOUs. One is the basic one that all groups need to sign, and then there's also an MOU affiliated with the RRDA. And these are signed by the lead contact. And more recently, we've also been getting the finance contact to sign the MOU RRDA form to ensure just a strong understanding of what agreements have been put in place. And in the MOU RRDA, we outline that reports are required through the course of the sponsorship timeline, whether that's a year or in some special cases, it's longer than that. So we'll cover 3 sections regarding reports in this webinar. First, what the reporting process looks like. Second, what to include in the report. And third, what not to include. So first, the reporting process. Here we'll look at what is required, when things happen, and how they happen. So first of all, what's the purpose of the reports? There's two reasons for the reports. One is to fulfill the CRA requirements by MCC. Because MCC provides tax receipts for the funds that come through MCC for the refugee sponsorship, we have certain requirements we have to fulfill under the CRA because those are tax receipted funds. So the reports is one of the ways that we fulfill those requirements. The second reason is to fulfill MCC's commitment of reporting to the MCC board. And this information is provided in the MOU RRDA that your group has signed. So who does the reports and who looks at them? Reports are initiated and completed by the CG finance contact, and they are reviewed and approved by the MCC finance team. So we will provide in this webinar, and we also provide in an email, the timeline of the reports. So it is the CG finance contact's duty to initiate sending those reports in. And the MCC will in turn review those. And if it's a report that initiates a check disbursement, it will be our job to make sure that gets to you in a timely fashion. So the reporting information gets sent out at two different main times. So when we first set up the budget template, when we first start the budgeting process, when we send you the original first RRDA budget template, at that point we include a note regarding reports. Please note this is our new process. If you've been working with us before these new processes have been put in place, it might have looked a little different for you. The second time we share this information is after the NAT, or the Notice of Arrival Time, for the family has been received by your group. At that point, the CG finance contact requests the first check from MCC, and in our response, we will send information on the reporting process regarding timelines and what's required. So for more information on the first check disbursement, please see our webinar series video number 3, labeled Check Disbursements. So there are 4 reports over 13 months for a 12-month sponsorship. 3 of these reports will be due during the sponsorship and 1 after the sponsorship is ended. So these are the timelines for those reports. The first is due by the month 4 after the families arrived. Second report is due in the 2nd week of month 7. Third report is due in the 2nd week of month 9. So these months are accounting, so month 7, the 7th month after the families arrived, the 9th month after the families arrived. And in the budget spreadsheet, it is, they are set out by months, and it has the name of the month 9, month 10, etc. And so that's how we track this. The 4th report is due by end of month 13, so 1 month after the end of sponsorship. And for more information, again, on the check disbursements, please see the webinar series video 3. These blue stars indicate the reports that are paired with check disbursements. So the 2nd and the 3rd reports, by sending the financial report in, that initiates those checks. So the 2nd report initiates the 2nd check, and the 3rd report initiates the 3rd check. And it will be the responsibility of the CG's finance contact to track report due dates, which will be provided to you, and to initiate check disbursement requests. So we send out report reminders in order to assist CGs with tracking dates, but it is the responsibility of the CG finance contact to track and remember those dates as well. So please note the way to initiate the 2nd and 3rd disbursements, as I said, is to send in the reports affiliated with those checks. And the next slide we're going to see, this is an example of a budget spreadsheet, and you can see at the bottom of the page the tabs. So this is the budget worksheet tab. That's what we work in prior to the family's arrival. And then once the family is arriving, we use the actual tab to do the reports, and the communication tab. We'll talk about that again in a little bit. I just want to draw your attention to stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So I don't have the budget worksheet tab up here to show you, but these appear in the budget worksheet tab. These appear in the month where those checks come. So stage 1 is affiliated with the preparation month because the first check should come before the family. The 2nd check appears in month, in month 7, month 8, and the 3rd in month 10. So they will appear on the budget worksheet tab under that month. And so in order to give time for the reports to be sent in and looked at before you're needing those checks, that's why the due dates for those reports are in the month 7 and month 9 rather than in month 8 and month 10. So it gives the group and MCC finance team, it gives us time to get those reports in and to look at them before your group is needing those checks. So for a refresher on initiating these disbursements, please see the webinar series number 3 video. So the actual tab. So the actual tab, as I showed you, that's where we live when we're doing reporting. That's the tab that we use while the family is here. And now that we have an understanding of why reports are required and how many are needed and when they're due, we're going to take a look at what a report actually looks like and what needs to be included in that report. So the budget worksheet tab in the spreadsheet is the tab used to create the budget in the beginning, and it's the tab that determines check disbursements. Once the budget's been approved, the majority of our work happens in the actual tab. And the actual and the communications tab, which I just showed you, those are our reporting tabs. They're where we record what happens financially throughout sponsorship. So in the following slides, up until slide 20, we're going to look at what needs to be included with some examples thrown in so you can see what exactly we're talking about. So what we need included is what's actually being spent, all money, and then all the money should be accounted for in the actual tab, and then we request some specific details regarding rent, utilities, and individual expenses, $300 or more. So with the budget worksheet tab, that's our estimate of what things might cost. So in the budget worksheet tab, you're gonna put in what you estimate you might be spending on rent. So if you think you can get a place for $1,200 a month, that may be what you put in for rent. And then when you actually get a place, you might discover that the rent's actually $1,300, or maybe it's only $1,100 a month. But the actual tab then is a place for you to show what's actually being spent. So the budget worksheet tab is what we're predicting. The actual tab is what is actually happening. So it's showing what's actually being spent. So if the amount that we think the government is going to send, that wrap amount, if we think they're going to send X amount of dollars and they end up actually only providing Y amount of dollars, or maybe they're providing more, but they're providing a different amount, that is showed in the actual tab. Now, we recognize that what you include in the report will be based on what the family is willing to share and what your group is comfortable with. However, regardless of how detailed the budget is, that actual tab is, we will want all funds accounted for in the actual tab as much as it is possible. So this means including the amount of funds that you don't know where they were directed to. So we will ask for, and we will also ask for some specific details. So we want information about rent, about utilities, and about individual expenses, 300 or more. As much as possible, we want specific details about those items. But we are flexible overall with other items about how much detail is shared. Now, while we ask that all funds are accounted for in the actual tab, we do not require receipts for everything, just for the following. So rent, utilities, and any individual expenses, 300 or more. So rent is pretty self-explanatory. By utilities, we're referring to hydro, water, gas, sewage if it's separate, those types of things. If you want to include internet and phone, by all means, if you want to include receipts for those, that's fine. But the things we really need receipts for are those hydro, water, gas, those items. Now, regarding the individual expenses, 300 or more, by this, we recognize that grocery trips can be pretty expensive. We do not need you to keep track of everything someone spends on groceries and in a really detailed manner and provide those receipts. We're referring to more larger items so for example, a dental bill that's over $300. We recognize that you may not be aware of all of the larger items the family spends and buys, but for the items that you know of, we would want receipts for those. So another example is in the preparation month, that like in the budget, like that time period before the family arrives, or that time period where you're spending a lot of money on behalf of the family to buy furniture and to set for startup costs, etc. If you were to buy a furniture item, for example, that was over $300, that would be something we would want a receipt for. And again, these are just examples, but those are some of the items that might be eligible that we might be considering we would want a receipt for that. If you have any questions about what you should provide receipts for, you can also always email finance@mcco.ca. And then every time we send a report reminder, we include that we're wanting receipts for this information. So that's important. So this is an example of the actual tab. We already looked at this, but I just wanted to draw your attention. You'll see that the income side on this tab is not green, it's blue. This allows you to input amounts into this part of the tab because this doesn't have formulas on it. So we would want to, in the income slide, show what the income is coming in. So for RAP, and for more information on RAP, please see our video 2 on creating a budget, as that will outline that for you. So RAP government, it will also talk about it, I believe, in our 3rd video for check disbursements. So RAP comes in for months 2 to 7. So this is where you would put that that's coming in. And you would also put where the MCC checks are coming in. So if this check amount of $17,468 is coming in, it should be coming before the family arrives, or even just after. This is where we would put that, or in month 1 if that makes more sense to you. But in one of these cells here, usually this one because there are expenses right in here that we put into. And so that's what we do with the income side. And where you would put those checks that are coming from MCC, where you would put those in. And then for expenses, you would put them in as makes sense according to category. Now, for example, if you're not sure what category to put them in, you can always add in categories under expenses. And if your specific spreadsheet's not letting you do that, you can contact us and we'll make sure that those are included, or that we make allowances so that you're able to include those. But for an example, if you buy a bike or something, that could go into transportation, for example. Dental you could use for dental, and medical if that made sense to you. So these items are flexible, but we do generally want them to match up what's on the budget worksheet tab. And so that would be more or less how you'd fill things in. And I'm going to give you examples in the 2 of different ways that you can fill in the actual tab. So as I mentioned, not all reports will have the same level of details. So the level of detail you include in the actual tab is dependent on the comfort level of the CG and the family with regards to how much is asked for or how much is shared. So as this is the case, I'm going to demonstrate 2 examples of how the reporting can be done to give you an idea of your options. So these are just examples, but I thought it might be helpful to visualize what we're talking about. So example 1, this is for groups that, a group that might provide bank statements for both the group and the family. So there's a lot of detail there of what exactly is being spent, assuming that the family is using their debit cards for most things, or are taking money out from their bank account. So this is for groups that have been able to obtain that, and that the family is comfortable with sharing, with that level of sharing. And in this example, bank statements could also represent if a group is really good at tracking with receipts. So maybe they don't have bank statements available, but like they've provided you all of the receipts of anything they've ever bought or close to. Or if they have kept other records of expenses, that would be this kind of example. So you can see up in the top, we've included the first check, that amount that's come from MCC. So this was just numbers I put in the budget worksheet tab so that we'd have something to work with. This is maybe the amount that's coming in for government. And I've put in like fairly detailed information about how much has been spent in the preparation, and these items you should have access to receipts or to more information about these items, because these are usually these are payments that would usually be made by the group because it's in preparation for the family's arrival. And then you can see, so in this example, there's actually a fair amount of items input in the different categories in shelter. in transportation, and some of the numbers are varying. It's the first couple of months. Maybe the group's trying to figure out what's the best amount to give the family. Maybe the family is doing different things, and so things are costing different amounts per month. So we can see that amounts here are filled in for almost like all the different expense lines, more or less. So we're seeing details in the preparation month, and we can see what's being spent in the following, the categories for transportation, for utilities. There's a bit of unknown, and that might be for cash expenses that the family was not able to track where exactly those funds went. So this is an example of what a more detailed budget spreadsheet might look like. So this is our second example. This would be for groups that would only provide the bare minimum due to discomfort from the family of receiving more, of giving more information, or maybe there's just a lot of communication difficulties that just getting more information is just not possible. Some families maybe don't want to keep receipts or forget to keep receipts. So this would be another example of how to work in a situation like that. So for this example, if you're not able to get a lot of detailed information, we would ask that you include in the actual tab what you as a CG give to the family, what the CG spends on behalf of the family, and then what's been required to be included, so rent and utilities, etc. I don't have this written on this slide, but we would also, like wrap would be included, what's provided to the family through government. So here's that example. So see, we've included the amount from the first check. We've included the amounts coming in from the government. We've included some details about preparation, because again, these expenses are made by the group, by the family in this example. And so not the family, I apologize, the group, the CG has made these expenses. And so as a CG, you should be able to track those more or less and provide any necessary receipts for those. Apologize about that. My mouse went away on me. So this is an example of what a less detailed budget would look like, an actual tab. So you can see that in that first month, we just have utilities. We have information about utilities. Everything else is in the living allowance line. And again, these are just examples. And here I've included information on rent and again, utilities. So this is kind of showing maybe there's more spent on utilities when the family first arrives to set up some of those startup costs. Like if a phone needs to be bought, for example. And then in here, I've included amounts for living allowance. Now, when I was creating this example, I was basing it on what I had input into the budget worksheet. And so in the budget worksheet, for example, for the month 2, I had a couple of more expenses than I had for month 3. So that living allowance is a little bit different. But for your group, it might look, you might give the exact same amount every month. And so when you take out rent and utilities, that living allowance line might be the same every month. And now you notice I've actually also have some amounts down here under unknown that match the government amounts. And actually this is in the wrong line, I apologize. This is showing by a contingency, but it should be showing in line by RAP in government, which is also known as the government support. So we know that the family is receiving those funds, but if we don't have specific information on how those are being spent, then we can put those in the unknown line. Now, the reality with a budget like this is, an actual tab like this is, we don't know necessarily, the finance team here at MCC doesn't know, looking at this report, if the family is saving anything. So that would be something that's good for your group to be aware of, just so you have an understanding of what kind of financial situation the family is in, and any information you have about how good they are at saving, how their budget is going, if they're being able to keep within their budget okay. That information could be communicated in the communications tab or in an email, so we have access to that information. But this is what we would maybe want on the actual tab. And again, we recognize that with an example like this, we might not have a lot of information about expenses over $300. In that case, for example, we would want, if a dental expense happened, the group would be likely to know about that. And so if proof of expense could be gotten for that, that would be very good. Please note, when you're sending reports and when you're receiving the report reminders that we will send, with each report reminder, we request specific information. So the information that we provide in those report reminders where we ask for different things, that does differ slightly between the reports. So for example, the first report comes and is not paired with a check disbursement. So the first report, we don't require information about who the check should be sent to. But in the second and third financial reports, we ask that you include that information each time you send a report that initiates a check request, so that for ease of access for us, so that we have that and we know that that's up-to-date reporting information. That's up-to-date check disbursement information. So we know that if someone's moved or if the finance contact won't be around that month and someone else is receiving the check on behalf of the group, that's going to the right person. So for example, we would include that in the report reminder. So it's really important to take a look at what we're asking for and to act accordingly. So that's everything that's supposed to be included in the actual tab and in those reports. And now it's time to look at items that should not be included. So costs that aren't included in the budget and costs covered outside of the budget. So for example, if your group raised funds outside of what was tax receipted through MCC, maybe you had a bake sale and people weren't really asking for tax receipts for the muffins they were buying, but that was money being raised for the sponsorship, and that's not going through MCC, for example, then that would not go into the budget. And if you have information about what expenses are being tied to those funds, those expenses would not be shown in the actual tab either. Now, if you're unable to keep it clear of what money, the MCC, RRDA money, or the money from that bake sale, for example, if you're not sure what's covering what expenses, then we recognize that some of those expenses in the actual tab might actually be being covered outside of the report, and we recognize that might happen, but we definitely wouldn't want to include that money in the report if we can help it. And we wouldn't put that in as income in the budget. Another example is if the family makes a purchase that was not budgeted for and they used child tax benefit money. So for example, if the family decides they want to spend a certain amount on, say, a car, and they make that decision, maybe without the group, but if they make that decision that this is something they want to do and they use child tax benefit money for that, then as we don't include child tax benefit money in the budget proper anymore, and so we also would not include that in the expense side on the actual tab. Now, we did receive information about child tax benefit that should not be included in the budget. Some groups that were working with us before we received that updated information were not aware of this, as we were not aware of it, and so some budgets did include child tax benefit. So if you're in that category that had begun their budget over a year ago, then that information might be slightly different for you. But going forward and for the last several months, we don't include child tax benefits in the budget, so it should not be included in the actual tab, and so expenses related to that income should not be included in the actual tab if at all possible. But information about, say for an example, a large expense that was paid for through CTB, that would be helpful to have that information in the communications tab. Or if there's a lot of additional funds your group raised outside of MCC, and it's possible that expenses covered by those funds are being included in the actual tab, it could be helpful to have that information so that when we're looking to make sure everything's adding up correctly, we have that additional information. If you have questions about that, please let us know. Please also look at our finance FAQs that provide some good information, and also take a look at our month 2 and month 3 webinars. Our series 2 and series 3 webinars. Also the webinar series number 1 video has a good finance overview, and so if you need a refresher on some of these items, you can also take a quick look at that video. It's a bit shorter, and it has a quick overview of everything financial related, from the very beginning when funds are first being donated to the very end after sponsorship's over. Please take a look at our Refugee portal. There's a lot of really great resources on there. If you go to the resources tab on the Refugee portal and then go to financial information, that's where the webinar series are, and there's the finance FAQs there and a lot of great other financial information. So I'd really encourage you to check that out. You can also email us at finance@mcco.ca. We're always happy to hear from you, and we're pretty good at getting back within a few days' time. So those are both really great places to look for more information. We do ask that you look at the Refugee portal first. We've put some good time into getting some great resources for you guys. So you might find that a lot of your questions are answered there, but we're always happy to hear from you too. Thank you so much for taking the time to look at this video and take a listen. And I hope the reporting information we've included here is helpful to you. Thanks so much. Take care now.